Thank you. And as Margaret said, but for folks who just came in, if you can um, edit your profile so it shows your name and the organization you are affiliated with, that would be great. It helps us with attendance and note taking, and if people are using the chat function in the meeting. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. This meeting we anticipate being pretty short, so 10 to 11, there you can see the time. The only attachments we had were the agenda and slides. So let's go ahead and get started. And actually, Margaret, can you kick us off? Sorry, I think I took your...
No, yeah, I don't know, no worries. Yeah, I think we can just take a quick look at the agenda. Yeah, so here is the agenda for today. Like Trang said, it is fairly short. We have this welcome and agenda review that we're doing right now. Then Trang and Sarah are going to go over some program updates. We have a preliminary list of provider organizations that are accountable to the cost growth target for this year's data cycle for 2021 to 2022. Then we're going to touch on the CGT medical pharmacy data collection pilot that we're hoping to get going, and have a wrap up and a little bit of reflection on the tag from last year. So I think we can start with the program updates. Next slide, thanks.
All right. So the first update we have, and Sarah, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything. Can we go to the next slide? First update is about the Cost Growth Target Advisory Committee. We have 3 new members. There were a couple vacancies this fall. OHA was recruiting for, we needed 2 consumer advocates and then 1 representative from a small rural hospital. And we got them. They were just confirmed by the Health Policy Board in November. Those are your 3 advisory committee members that are new: Jeremy Davis from Grand Ronde Hospital, Kate Dennison from the Attorney General's Office, and Charlie Fisher from OSPIRG. Next slide. So a little bit of context. These advisory committee members are appointed for 2-year terms. Some members can have their terms extended. They usually try to have a little bit of overlap between continuing members and new members. And we are opening recruitment for new committee members in just a couple months. February, March 2024 for appointment that spring. Sarah, do you want to add?
I do. So we'll be talking to the current committee members from the initial appointment whose terms, initial terms end in May, and seeing, assessing interest in whether or not they want to continue and who's, extending terms and who's rolling off. So know that there are some organizations who have been really interested in participating on the advisory committee and wanting to know about when there'll be opportunities to apply, and just wanting to be really clear that we do have recruitment opportunities coming up. We won't know until probably February or March which positions or which seats will be vacant, because we want to talk to all the committee members first about extending and not extending, and then figure that out. But want to just be really clear and signal in advance that recruitment is coming, and we do expect to have at least some vacancies, and we'll have new committee members appointed for May.
All right, thanks. Next slide. So for 2024, the advisory meetings are already locked in. They are the 4th Tuesday of the month. There are the details for it. You could visit that URL to see all of the dates. Bit of fun news, the June meeting will be in person, so that will be really exciting. Next slide. Here is a snapshot of the draft work plan for next year. These are all the hot topics the advisory committee is slated to go over each month. Sarah, do you want to add anything to this?
The advisory committee is really interested in 2024 in spending some time thinking about not just identifying the cost drivers, but thinking about what the recommendations or the strategies or the tools at different levels to address those cost drivers. So you'll see that the conversations are broken up around cost drivers in various sort of domains and markets and lenses. And then there's a really heavy focus starting in the summer on tools for payers and providers, recommendations for payers and provider organizations to meet the target, recommendations for state actions to meet the target, and there'll probably be recommendations more broadly as all emerging as part of that. The goal for 2024 is that with these shorter meetings, each meeting is focused on one major topic so that we don't stop cramming the agendas quite as full with the advisory committee. And this is the proposed schedule.
All right, next slide, please. Okay. Accountability. Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll keep going. So the Cost Growth Target Advisory Committee spent some time in their September and November meetings talking about accountability, specifically about the financial penalties, and started discussing potential principles for establishing financial penalties that OHA could use to guide the upcoming rulemaking next year. There's a lot of concern about financial penalties, and we've been hearing that in a lot of ways, and a lot of that conversation came up at the advisory committee. Next slide. These are the draft principles that the advisory committee was discussing, and there's a link to the full document from November, but they were thinking about financial penalties as being the measure of last resort and really focusing efforts on PIPs and opportunities to improve through the performance improvement plans first. Penalties should be meaningful, but not jeopardize access or the viability of the entity. So again, a lot of concerns that have come up around solvency. And if the financial penalty is too large, will entities be threatened and not be able to stay in business? There was a lot around transparency and that it should be really clear how penalties are calculated and how an entity knows that they will or will not be assessed a penalty, and that there should be an appeals process. So this is sort of thematically what the advisory committee discussed. Next slide. However, they did not reach consensus and they did not sort of officially or formally adopt these principles. So they suggested a number of edits to those principles, and we will go ahead and incorporate those. You can see the suggested edits on the slide here. The committee generally felt like these principles were going in the right direction and they'd be helpful for guiding rulemaking, but they didn't officially endorse them. So they're going to live on as a draft and they will inform the rulemaking process. And I'll talk more about the rulemaking process in a second, but just wanted to be really transparent with everyone that we had these discussions. This is where the advisory committee landed, and that is all documented in the November meeting materials. Next slide. So the next step is rulemaking. We've had a lot of conversations with you this year, starting back in the spring. We had conversations with the advisory committee. We've been hearing from folks offline all year. So now that advisory committee discussion, the TAG discussion, all of that is informing our drafting of the rules and the guidance. So sub-regulatory guidance. We are going to be convening a rules advisory committee, or a RAC. We will be doing that as a separate body. So you might remember last year, earlier, we did the data submission rules advisory committee as part of the TAG. We're not going to do that. This will be a separate rules advisory committee. So the draft rules will be brought to the RAC. The RAC will comment on that. OHA will address those comments, revise the draft potentially. There could be multiple rounds of that through rulemaking. We expect this will be a pretty complicated rulemaking process. And then sometime in the spring, OHA will finalize the rules and then publish them and implement them. So there is still an iterative process, but again, being really clear that we're moving out of the TAG and the committee discussion phase and into the rules advisory committee phase. Next. We are going to open recruitment for the Rules Advisory Committee. I said before the end of the month when I made this slide, and realizing that the end of the month is tomorrow. So we'll try to get that out this week. That is the goal. We are thinking about a y'all come approach to the RAC, which means that there won't be a set number of seats. You're not going to say this is a 10-member RAC. Any organization that wants to be part of the RAC can be. We're going to limit it to one representative per organization. So folks that are interested and want to participate, absolutely, you'll be able to do that, but you might want to talk internally and figure out who the best representative for your organization is. If we get multiple applicants from the same organization, we will coordinate with you and say, hey, we got 3 applications. Which one of you do you want it to be? So we'll help with that if needed. So more to come in terms of the application process for that. Again, hoping to get that out this week. We're anticipating the first meeting of the RAC will be in January and that there will be multiple meetings. And just wanted to be really also transparent that the RACs provide an advisory role. So the RAC will provide feedback, they'll raise issues, concerns, comments. It'll be a really great space to continue this discussion about accountability. But OHA will make the final decision on the rules and finalize that language and publish the rules with Secretary of State. So more on all of this coming soon. Any questions about where we are with accountability and the next steps for rulemaking? Okay. Next. I think I'm done my section. Oh, yep. Okay, Trang, back to you.
Yeah. All right. So this is it's only relevant for payers that need a determining reasonableness conversation. This is something we discussed with a handful of payers in your data validation meeting. Remember, there is no accountability mechanisms applied this year. But with rulemaking happening, we thought we would throw it out there for folks to let us know if you have a preference. Would you prefer to hold reasonableness meetings earlier, so December or January, or would you want to wait until after rulemaking? And we're anticipating this to be a couple months later, around April, May. You don't have to say anything out loud. I'm realizing right now, if you want to give verbal comment, I guess you can if you want. But if you would please share your thoughts, email us at our program email right there by December 5th, that would be great. So this only applies to payers that were over the cost growth target in a certain market. And this is something we discussed with you in your validation meeting.
Yeah, payers, you know who you are, hopefully. If you're not sure if this is you, let us know too. And I want to be clear here that this is a little bit of like, we're not sure what the right path is, and we would love to hear from you about the pros and cons. I think some of you might want to have this conversation out of the way, and like we've had in the previous years, this is essentially still a practice run where no accountability applies, but we want to go through and continue to develop this process. Doing it now in December, January could help inform and finalize the rules. And we know that some of you would prefer to have this conversation after there's more certainty about what is actually in the rules and how that all works, and might prefer to have it on the back end when the rules are, you know, final, if not close to final, and it would be more of a baked process. So we're flexible. I think my preference is that we don't have some do it in December and some do it in April. I think we'd prefer to batch them. So if everyone is sort of clear, we want to do it now, then we'll do it now. But really just want to know what you think would be more helpful. Like, what would provide more reassurance? Is it better to go into this now and have the chance to inform rules, or do you think it would you'd actually have an easier time with your organization having these conversations after the rulemaking has happened? So let us know.
Oh, and I see there are some comments in the chat. What's the process for identifying the participant per organization in the RACs? I think Sarah briefly mentioned this. If there were multiple interested people from one organization, we would kind of send a communication to everybody and work it out, or have you all decide.
Yeah, you need to decide. It is an organization's choice who they want to be the person on the RAC. So often, if you have a government relations person, that is often the person who participates in RACs, but that's certainly not a requirement. We don't have restrictions. It's up to you to decide who the best representative for your organization is. We'll let you know if multiple people accidentally apply and there's a conflict, but otherwise it's your call.
And then Travis asks, would it benefit the rulemaking team to have those conversations before the April-May period? I think, as Sarah was saying, like, we could go either
Yes.
way.
I mean, yes, it's helpful. I mean, I think this will help us understand what we've got as a draft. And if we need to make revisions to the rules, it would be helpful to do it earlier. Also recognizing that December and January are a really busy time. Scheduling will be hard. Ada, I see your comment. Absolutely, that's true. And also knowing that there's a lot of anxiety out there about accountability and about having these conversations. And if it might be a little helpful for us to do it before we do the rulemaking, but if it's going to make things easier with you all, and especially with your leadership that needs to participate in these conversations, then we would rather do it later.
So please let us know. All right, next slide. Okay, a really great update on data submission for the files that were just provided a couple months ago. Next slide, please. Okay, so great news. We are done with data validation. We finished it earlier this month, November 7th. I know all of you are super excited to have done validation. Our team was really excited at the pace of validation this year. Just to recap, this year, the data cycle included 40 total files representing 18 parent entities. 39% of the files were finished within the first month. So we really booked it this go round. Next slide, please. Just to compare with how far we've gone since year one. Year one, we took a long time. There was a lot of back and forth. This was the first time for many of you and the first time for our team too. The statewide file, we had a preliminary statewide file, but technically we weren't completely finished until 242 days later after the due date. We did a lot better in year two, 109 days, and year three, we did it in roughly 2 months. We finished the statewide file before the year's end, well before the year's end. So we're super excited. All the staff, technical staff that have been working on this with us, you guys like really deserve a round of applause. This year was really great. And since we have a statewide file, that means we could do analyses sooner. We could reach out to provider organizations earlier to let them know what's happening and give them their data as soon as we can. Next slide. And speaking of provider organizations, we do have a preliminary list to share with folks today. Next slide, please. There is one little caveat. So we do have some provider organization identity issues, and we're going to be reaching out to just a couple payers to clarify some TIN issues. The full list we anticipate will be posted soon. It'll be posted on the provider organization webpage. So what we're sharing with you now is the preliminary list. All of these organizations are definitely on the list for this data cycle. And after we get those clarifications, the list might not change at all, or there might be more organizations added to the list. No organization will be taken off. Next slide, please. So kind of similar amount of organizations as last year, a little over 50. So this year we, in this preliminary list, we have 53 provider organizations that have met the inclusion criteria. The next step we are going to do is share data with those organizational contacts in December. I know everyone's wondering what meetings are looking like. So we're going to share data with everybody. Meetings are only required for provider organizations that have cost growth over the target in a particular market. So we will meet individually with all of those entities. And of course, we offer meetings to go over data with any provider organization that wants to meet with us. There are a couple new provider organizations that haven't been included in the cost growth target program yet, and we will be meeting with them to have kind of an orientation meeting to onboard them. And these meetings will start in January 2024. Next slide. So four new organizations were added to the group for this year. Physicians Medical Center, this is a provider entity that was actually in our first cycle of data collection. These are organizations that are kind of teetering on that 60K member month threshold. So sometimes they fall on and off. Physicians Medical Center is included in this cycle. Also joined by 3 totally new organizations to the program: Oregon Pediatrics, Sanium Memorial Hospital, and Woodburn Pediatric Clinic. This year, 2 organizations dropped off: Northwest Health Partners and River Rock Family Practice. Next slide. This is the breakdown for what organizations are included under which of the 3 markets we monitor in this program. So this is Medicaid, our biggest market. So you can see there's a whole bunch of provider organizations there. Organizations are listed in alphabetical order. So this isn't going to be, well, I think some of you know the way we do public reporting for provider organizations and payers are more stratified. We have groupings by size and such. So we look at like next to like when it comes to public reporting. But for just this preliminary list, this is everybody in alphabetical order. Next slide, please. So those are Medicaid, and then here are our Medicare Advantage and commercial provider organizations. The list looks fairly similar to last year. Any questions from folks? So as I noted earlier, there might be some organizations to be added to this list once we clear up some TIN issues. All right, next.
Sharing, hold on, there's a question in the chat. Some organizations are listed twice because it means they've met the threshold for inclusion in given markets. So on this slide, you can see Asante is included for both Medicare Advantage and for commercial patients. So if you see multiple listings, that's what's going on.
Just a comment, I'm looking at I'm not sure if Mosaic under commercial is maybe a mistake, actually.
Yeah, if you have a question about a listing, yeah, please let us know. Can we see your comment and we will double check this list.
Yeah, because the list I have just has them under Medicaid.
Okay, that might have been a mistake when we were making the slide. All right, thanks for bringing that up. Any other comments or questions? Rose says, if we don't see our organization, then is it reasonable to assume that we are not subject to the cost growth target? No, it is not exactly, because we may be adding organizations to this list. We have some data clarification issues to ask a couple payers. So this list isn't final yet.
Can you go back to the Medicaid slide, Gerondi, for a second? Thanks. And I think I want to recognize there's also the weirdness of some organizations that are smaller and closer to that threshold are going to drop on and off. And so depending on how that works, we're going to have some weirdness for public reporting. So if you meet the cost growth target threshold for last year, but not this year, we're thinking about those 2-year measurement periods. And so you have to meet in both years to be included in the cost growth target and in the public reporting, but there might be gaps where one data cycle you drop out, one data cycle you come on. So know that that's also, because it's that 2 years, to look at the growth between the 2 years, that also adds to the noise here. Blaine, in terms of opportunity for trending, I think the plan is once the provider organization list is finalized, the team will start preparing the data output like we did last year and sending it to all provider organizations. As Trang said earlier, not all provider organizations need a meeting, but all provider organizations will receive their data output.
Holding for any last questions. All right. Please email us if you have a question or you see your organization, but you weren't expecting to see your organization under a certain line of business. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, and next one. Okay, and I will hand it off to Margaret to talk about this data collection pilot.
Thanks, Trang. Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna go over, we sent out an update about this, I think last month as well. But we are hoping to do a medical pharmacy data collection pilot in the next couple of months. So I think, could we go to the next slide, please? So just as a reminder, currently in CGT data submissions, drug costs are being reported in a couple different places. We have the retail pharmacy claims category, which is, I think, probably pretty straightforward to produce just based on pharmacy claims, and that's broken out by itself. But then there is also drug spending that happens under the medical benefit. And currently in the CGT data, that is not being split out separately. It's being reported in the location in which those drugs were dispensed. So for example, if you receive drugs in the hospital inpatient setting, those would be rolled up with all the rest of the hospital inpatient costs and reported with that. But however, we would like to be able to get a more clear picture of and a full picture of what's happening with pharmacy spending to be able to track those cost growth, and see what's happening with it. Next slide, please. So yeah, so we had brought this up, I think, back in the April TAG meeting and asked for some of your feedback initially on whether it was possible to break out medical pharmacy spending from the rest of medical claims spending. And the initial feedback was that, you thought that that could be done, but it was probably fairly complicated. And the method might, left to yourselves, you might come up with a bunch of different methods for doing that. So it was suggested that OHA develop some guidance and specifications on how we want you to break that spending out in the claims. So this is us following up on that suggestion. We are hoping to sort of take the lead as OHA in this process of developing code and specifications, but we're hoping to recruit a few of you from the payer side with knowledge of medical pharmacy claims to provide us with feedback and input in the development of those specifications and some code. So we're looking at a time commitment of probably around 3 Zoom meetings in early 2024, and then probably some time between meetings to review materials or provide suggestions. And yeah, so that's kind of what we're looking for, and we still need volunteers. Next slide, please. So if you are able to do that, we really encourage your participation. Feel free to send us an email at our inbox in the next couple weeks. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Margaret, can I just jump in with a couple things real quick? I think
Sure.
if folks have questions or want to talk more about this before committing, also reach out and we're happy to do that. I know I have at least one email that I need to respond to, someone wanting to talk through this. Two, I want to be really clear, please, I mean, if you want to, I'm not the boss of you, but we're not asking you to go pull data sort of on your own and start doing this. I think what we're hoping in this pilot is that we'll discuss, we'll prepare some proposed specifications, then there's a data pull, a discussion of that, maybe some tightening, but we're not asking folks to sort of do any work before that first meeting. And I think there might've been some confusion about that when we talked about it earlier.
Sounds good. Does anyone have any questions? Looks like no. So yeah, so please get in touch with any questions or hopefully to volunteer after the meeting. I think I can hand it back to Trang then to finish it up.
Yes, thank you. All right. So the last bit is just about tag scheduling. So hopefully you already know, but the December 20th tag is canceled. So you can scratch that off your calendars. Next slide, please. And in thinking of next year, we wanted to go over how our tag went this year. So we held times for all 12 months. And out of 12 meetings, we used 8 of them. We ended up canceling 4 tag meetings. Like previous years, this usually happens around the time and after data files are submitted. There's not a lot of discussion happening in the fall and people are very busy with validation and other things going on. So you can see what that looks like. The active tag meeting season does seem to be late winter, spring, and summer. This is where, if we have methodology topics to bring to you folks, this is where we present them and discuss them. So that's what that looked like this year. Next slide, please. So right now we're trying to schedule for next year, and we wanted to pose this question to the group. What do you all think? Would you like to hold and keep all 12 meetings, or only a subset? Like we highlighted 6 months here, which seemed to be the busy season. And also to note, even if we only keep these 6 meetings or another, subset of meetings, we will still be sending program updates to our tag email listserv. So if people have any thoughts right now, you could share them verbally or in the chat, or you could email us later. How do folks feel? I'll pause and let some people speak. Do you think it's, it feels safer to maybe have those 12 meetings on hold and cancel as we go along? All right, thanks. I see we have some chats coming in.
Can I live propose a compromise?
Oh, yeah.
What if for those meetings that Trang has grayed out, we protect the time, but only an hour? We hold the first hour as a placeholder just in case we need it, but not the 2-hour placeholder. See an agreement in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels safe to, yeah. protect the time. All right, I think a lot of people are on board with that idea. Okay, so keep a lookout for those meeting invites. And we will update our website and all that jazz for next year, which is coming very, very fast. All right, thanks, folks. Next slide. And this is our last slide, which we want to hold for end of year tag reflections. This is the third year we've had this tag. Yeah, we started spring, winter of 2021. Many of you have been with us since the very beginning. So in thinking about this past year, what do you think's going well? Do you feel more connected to the program? What can be improved? What do you wish this space offered? Keeping in mind that there is also the advisory committee, and that this tag space is reserved for mainly technical data submission methodology discussion. So do people want to share their thoughts? What's going well? What could be improved?
I was going to say, because it's easier than maybe typing it out, but it feels like there could be a better delineation from like an operations standpoint and a technical standpoint of the meetings that we have around CGT. So there's times where I need to be present for technical, but not so much about program, and to, I guess, ensure people's time is well used. Like having my chief financial officer sit through technical stuff is not a great use of their time, and nor is it a good use of my time to sit through program stuff. So I'm wondering if there can be more focused breakouts of what's covered at different times.
That's a great suggestion, Ada, thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do other people also feel that that separation and or that disjunction in content? All right. Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Okay, well, it doesn't seem like anybody has other feedback. If you do, you know where you could reach us. That email right there. And with that, I think we could end a little bit early. Thanks everyone for joining us this Wednesday, and this is our last tag of the year. So have a great rest of the year, holiday season, all that stuff. And we'll see you next year.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.